Light my fire!
Fish on, baby!
Now that is slabba-dabba-ding-dong.
Oh, yes!
Onlinefishing.tv. At last, a channel just for anglers. With original new series exclusive to the channel, together with classic series and programs from around the world never seen before on British television, you can now watch what you want, when you want, as many times as you want. Onlinefishing.tv. Welcome to your world. For those of you who fish in England, Wales, or the Borderesque in Scotland, and like dutiful anglers, pay your annual rod licence, you're probably not alone in wondering what on earth happens to all that money. Especially considering that last year alone, the EA sold over 1.3 million licences, which, if you'll excuse the pun, netted them £23 million. And on top of that, you can add another 9.5 million that the government chucks into the hat, and 500,000 that comes from salmon and eelnet licences. Well, the logistics of processing all the licences, supporting and equipping over 500 full and part-time employees all over the country, takes care of around £6 million. Over 3 million goes on scientific research, investigations and surveys, and 9 million is spent on providing fisheries improvement and restocking of both rivers and still waters. Another 9 million gets spent on promoting angling, whether it be through various training and coaching schemes, publicity material, or general information. And finally, about £6 million goes on stopping people from doing things that they really shouldn't. Now, you could be forgiven for starting to glaze over when presented with a whole load of statistics, so we thought we'd go and meet some of the people who are helping to spend all this money. And our journey begins at this place, the National Fish Laboratories at Brampton.
Primarily our role is on fish health, fish ageing and non-native species. For example, the main work we do on fish health is to provide technical advice and policy advice, but we also do health checks for all of the Environment Agency's movements of fish, and we investigate around 100 fish kills or fish mortalities every year that are solely to do with fish disease. We don't look at pollution work, we don't look at water quality problems, it's just about fish disease. And the vast majority of those, 95% plus, are on still waters, on coarse fish and carp. In our investigations into fish mortalities, we're extremely reactive. We can get a call any time of the year from anywhere in England and Wales. Our local area team go out, see the fishery, and if they decide that it's a fish disease involved, they'll get the fish to us as quickly as possible, and within an hour of them arriving here, they'll be on the slab and we'll start to take the samples from them that we need to put together the investigation of what's causing the problem.
In this instance, a fishery owner with a mixed fishery has reported something very wrong with his rainbow trout, which keep dying. And understandably, he's extremely concerned.
The symptoms that they said were happening at the site were sort of gasping at the surface, so that could suggest that there's maybe a problem with the gills, but unless we have a closer look, we won't be able to tell exactly what's causing the problem.
The investigations are extremely thorough, and the autopsies are backed up by detailed reports from the fishery to gain as complete a picture as possible. Initial theories of a parasite seem to be confirmed when examining the gills under the microscope. It looks like a nasty little creature called Agacilus sibbaldii. In the histology department, tissue samples from infected fish are set in wax, and incredibly thin sections are then shaved off using a machine, a little like a high-tech bacon slicer called a microtome.
We usually routinely do kidney, liver, heart, spleen, gill, gut. You can do brain, eyes, anything. But anything you see in the fish when you're dissecting them that looks abnormal, tumours, growths. It's the same routine you'd use on humans. You know, if I was looking at a tumour or a biopsy in a human, it's exactly the same thing. So if we found, say, a parasite within the fish and we've identified the parasite, you then want to know, well, so what? Is it causing any problems? So this is the Agastolus sieboldii parasite that we saw in the gill. You can see it here where it's attached. Then this is a histology section that we've prepared from the gill, and you can see the parasites embedded here and another one in the corner. And here you can see that you can get them actually feeding on both sides. So if you can imagine this response coming from both sides of the gill, so we can see that even just 1 or 2 parasites, the response is quite localised, but it's quite a big response. So when you start getting the heavy burdens over a large surface of the gill, you can quickly imagine the damage it's going to cause.
There's no effective treatment for the Agastolus sieboldii parasite, and once present in a water, they are almost impossible to eradicate. So, when detected, it's absolutely vital to ensure that they do not spread.
The parasite Agastolus sieboldii that we've seen today is, at the moment, primarily a problem in still waters. The thing that bothers me as an angler is the potential for these parasites to move into rivers, particularly lowland rivers, like here in the Cambridgeshire Fens or the Somerset Levels, where they have excellent tench fishing and bream fishing. We're really concerned about the potential Agastolus sieboldii has to damage these fisheries. Hence, whenever anyone wants to move fish, we require a health check and prevent the movement of these parasites. Another main part of our job here is technical advice on non-native species. Now, I'm sure every angler out there watching can think of non-native species they'd like to catch, like Wells catfish and zander and grass carp, and in the right situation they can be controlled and aren't a problem. What will surprise a lot of people is that the most invasive, the most dangerous non-native fish in this country is actually a very small fish, only grows up to about 10-15 centimetres. It's called a topmouth gudgeon.
Now banned, these unwelcome invaders were introduced into this country by the ornamental trade, where they were known as clicker barbs or false harlequins. But some of them either escaped from ornamental farms or were released by owners.
It's particularly damaging to our native fish populations because firstly it eats the same food as roach and carp, which are the most popular angling species. They mature at a very young age, less than a year old, and they're very small when they mature, but it can also breed 3-4 times in a year. Now compare that to a roach that has to get to 11-12 centimetres and 4 years old before they spawn and only do it once a year, and you can see why topmouth gudgeon populations explode in a fishery. But they're also going to be impacting on the invertebrates in the water, and that's going to have a wider impact on the whole ecology of a lake. When we examine a water and discover that there's practically nothing there in small fish populations other than the topmouth gudgeon, it shows that there's really no future for that fishery, and we have to step in and take action. It's not all bad news because we're making great strides in eradicating them from our fisheries. First of all, we've used piscicides to kill them, having first taken out all the valuable tench, bream and carp and other fish that we can rescue. But more recently, we've been using perch as a biological control, and this seems to be really successful and something we're really enthusiastic about. The work we do here on fish health and non-native species is entirely funded by the rod licence payer, which includes me, by the way. I'm hugely enthusiastic about the work we do here, and I think one thing we want to get across is how anglers can help with that. The spread of fish disease only really comes from the movement of fish, so anglers can always help by reporting any suspicions they have about fish being moved illegally, but also themselves never ever moving fish without getting consent from the Environment Agency first. And equally, the anglers are our eyes and ears out there looking out for non-native species, and we'd be really interested in finding out about any non-native species populations we don't already know about.
If a river or fishery is in need of restocking, maybe as a result of a pollution incident, a consequence of severe flooding, or just to increase basic numbers, there's a very good chance that they'll come from this place, Calverton Fish Farm. It's one of 2 fish farms specialising in coarse fish, and together they put around 500,000 fish every year into our lakes and rivers. In addition to that, there are also 5 salmon farms that are putting in 1.5 million fry, parr and smolts. Here at Calverton, they specialise in 9 main species: dace, chub, roach, bream, tench, crucian carp, rudd, grayling and barb. The process starts when eggs are taken from wild fish. These fish are then returned to their native habitat, whilst their eggs remain here in the hatchery.
When we stock the small, tiny larvae, and these may only be 8 or 9 millimetres long, we stock them in the May, early June, and by the October and November, those fish will have grown to 8 centimetres, 10 centimetres, so it's a very fast growth rate in that first year. And in their second year, when we stock them out again, then we're expecting them to grow to between 12 and 18 centimetres. And it's at that sort of size and at that kind of age, 18 months of age, that's when we stock them out into the rivers.
With a feeder situated directly over a water pump, it ensures that there are no lazy fish. If they want to eat, they're going to have to do some exercise. There are 35 different ponds here, and the fish are moved to specific ponds at different stages of their development. This growth process is something that the staff here are keen not to rush.
One of the reasons we want the fish to grow at a natural rate is because it's well established now that fish that grow very, very, very quickly also have short lifespans. And we want our fish to be in the river for 15, 20 years, contributing to the population. If we grow them too quickly, there is a chance that they will, although they'll grow big, that they will live a shorter period of time. When we stock our fish into the wild, we want them to know what natural food is. Each one of the ponds spend at least 3 months of the year bone dry. When we drain the ponds down in the autumn, there's a lot of nutrient that's been locked up in the bottom mud because of all the fish production from the previous summer. So by draining the pond down and allowing the air to get to it and the frost to get to it, that nutrient is oxidised and it's recycled. So when we fill the ponds again in the spring, all of that nutrient is available, and that forms the basis for the food chain, the algae and the Daphnia and on upwards. It's at that stage that we stock the fish, and they grow very, very quickly on nature's own. It's the best fish food.
At the moment, the team are preparing a consignment of barbel to go to the River Stour in Dorset. First, though, they must be graded for size and then counted. To minimise handling and therefore reduce stress, both these tasks are done by machine. Here, the grading machine sorts the fish into 3 size groups. It does this by using an ingenious system of conveyor belts, which are tapered at one end and which allow a fish of a certain size to slip through into a holding bin. The counting is done with this machine, which has sensors situated below the surface of the 2 exit chutes. With thousands of fish to count, it's quicker, more accurate, and ultimately much better for the fish.
Minimum handling means minimum amount of damage, no damage in actual fact, and minimum stress. And the fish are much healthier, much better able to resist diseases. So, you know, for us, that is a very, very important part of the job. You know, these are live organisms, these are animals, and we do treat them with the respect they deserve.
Of course, they have to deliver the fish all over the country to often fairly inaccessible locations. They need a rather special off-roader that's capable of handling the 2-ton load. It comes in the shape of a custom-made 6-wheel drive Ibex.
It's got an OxyGuard system on the back which monitors all the oxygen in each one of the tanks,
We basically set the computer to keep the oxygen level round about 100%, and it automatically doses the oxygen into the water to keep the fish at in the sort of best of health. And the system's monitored continuously all the while we're in transit. Basically, when the fish get there, they're ready to go. They're not sort of stressed in any way. They just go straight into the river and away they go. They swim away and go and find the ideal position in the river.
Although at first glance their new home, the River Stour, may look idyllic, it is not without its problems for a young fish population, flooding being a particular issue. To give some kind of safe haven during a flood, the EA have been testing some different types of flood refuges.
One of the features of the River Stour is that it rises very quickly and comes down quite rapidly as well, but when it does flood, it comes right up bank high and you've got a tremendous flow. So you have a continual downstream drift of coarse fish fry. And the aim of this project is really to try and retain coarse fish fry within this reach. So we're providing big slack areas of habitat where they can get into out of the main river flow. And basically what we've done here is to take out sections of the bank, just small sections, leaving a little island structure in the middle. So you've got an entrance and an exit to a large area of slack water, so fish can move freely in and out. As the river rises, you can see that the banks there are shelving quite gradually up. This whole area fills up and it's almost like a large online lake, providing a huge sort of slack area for fish to move in and out of.
It's hoped that the scheme will prove a sustainable and relatively low-cost solution to the problem of retaining fish in this section of the river. And this is just one of a number of different flood refuges being trialled in the area.
The top fry bay has got a low-lying groin built out at the front of it, so we put about 40 or 50 tons of locally sourced rock material to create a low-lying berm, which basically increases the area of slack water. So it's like an add-on to the fry bay itself, but it also provides habitat for other species throughout different times of the year. For example, during the summer it's narrowing down the river a little bit, just pinching the river a little bit. So it's providing good habitat for species such as dace and chub, who like a bit of fast-flowing water for spawning purposes, at the right time of year.
But back to the fish. Having travelled over 200 miles, the young barbel finally arrive at their new home. Not all the fish are going to be released here. Some of them will be transported by local EA teams to 2 other parts of the river nearby. Today is just part of a 3-year project that will eventually introduce 9,000 barbel into the river. And it has involved not only the EA, but also the National Trust, local fishing clubs, and in particular the Barbel Society, who made the initial request for the restocking programme.
Well, it's a really big event for me as Research and Conservation Officer for the Barbel Society, because I like to think that this project was largely driven by an idea the Society had to replenish the barbel stocks of the River Stour, which are in dire straits at the moment. And this is the second batch of little barbel that hopefully will produce some terrific barbel fishing in 5 or 10 years' time. And the Stour will once again become a famous barbel river. But it's more than just making better barbel fishing for barbel fishermen, it's improving the river as a whole. So we're involved in spending money not only on barbel as fish, but on habitat enhancement work and improving the river for the barbel and all the other species and all the other wildlife for that matter.
Yeah, we're stocking the barbel into 3 different sites in this part of the River Stour in between Wimborne and Blandford, and we've marked them with 3 different colours of special dye, so that when they get caught by anglers in the future, or we pick them up in fisheries surveys, we know where those fish have been stocked and what year they've been stocked. So the fish are marked, last year they're marked on the right hand side of the head, and this year we've marked them on the left hand side of the head with the same colour for each site, so we can tell between which year they've been stocked. So it begins to tell us a bit about how fish move in the Stour system, if there's any problems with habitat, if they're all getting washed downstream, if there's still sort of issues that we need to resolve, and just how the fish are doing really. So it provides a bit more information rather than just putting the fish in and sort of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. And we've done this work in partnership with the Barbel Society, so they've helped supply some of the dye and come up to Calverton, our fish farm, and mark them as well.
Well, it's really exciting to see those fish going in. You really care for them. I was really worried that they wouldn't survive the journey, and I'm really worried that they're now not in the safe environment of a fish farm, but they're out on their own in the wild with lots of things that want to eat them, cormorants and pike and perch and fishermen even that want to take them to eat. So I'm worried for their future. I just hope enough of them survive to make the whole thing worthwhile.
I mean, I got into fisheries because I was an angler, fished since I was sort of 7 years old. My dad and my granddad started taking me fishing, and I just just wanted to have a sort of career in fisheries, and always bought my rod licence, and it's just nice to now see where that money goes. I think it'd be very fair to say that 80% of the people I work with fish, and that's how they got into the job. It's very much still a vocational occupation that people live, breathe and eat fishing pretty much day in, day out, and it's what we love doing at the weekend, and we come to work and we enjoy doing it as well. And that's the real enjoyment for me, is being able to put something back into angling, because I've got so much out of it.
In order to ascertain if a river or stillwater fishery is in need of help, or if any improvement work has actually been effective, it's essential that fish stocks are monitored. Here, on the River Lee in Hertfordshire, the team are electrofishing a stretch where previous surveys revealed a lack of juvenile habitat. As a result, 2 years ago, improvement works were carried out, and it's encouraging to report that they are now recording a significant increase in fish stocks.
At the front, you'll be holding the anodes, and then out to the back of the boat there is a cathode, so it obviously completes the circuit. In the boat itself there is a generator. The power from that then goes through a control box. Basically what will happen is that a small electric current is put into the river. That immobilises the fish just briefly, stuns them enough so that we can scoop them out in our nets. Then they'll be put into some oxygenated water to enable them to recover. They usually come round within between about 10 and 20 seconds.
Chub.
Once that has been completed, the fish are then measured.
Chub 131.
Scale samples are taken, sent off to the Environment Agency's National Fish Laboratory up at Brampton, where age analysis takes place. That gives us an idea of how the population is changing, whether they've got good growth rates, whether they've got bad growth rates, so that we know if we need to improve or enhance, sections or habitat within certain areas of the river. Although it does look very easy and it looks like a very nice job on a bright sunny day like today, it does require significant training and experience, so that you're not damaging the fish in any way, but at the same time that you're catching all the fish that are in the section as best you can. A lot of people might look at the Environment Agency doing lots of fish surveys and think, oh right, yeah, what actually gets done with that data? It's something we quite often get asked. But when you see, that sort of on the ground, what is actually the actual improvements that we've had in this section in particular, then yeah, it's absolutely brilliant.
Different areas of the country inevitably throw up different challenges, particularly when it comes to enforcement. Kevin Summerson and his team from the Newcastle office have more than most on their plate, having to deal with coarse fisheries, sea fishing up to 6 miles offshore, and being in close proximity to some rather fine salmon rivers, the added problem of organised poaching.
We get the full range of people, from somebody that's decided to go fishing with his kids for the day and hasn't bought a rod licence. He'll maybe argue the point that he's just there teaching his children to fish, and we've probably watched him using the rod for half an hour and the kids had 2 minutes go with it, all the way up to people with fairly serious criminal records for a variety of offences, who among the offences they commit go out poaching fish.
As fisheries enforcement officers, we actually have the same powers as a constable to do our job. So basically, when it comes to fisheries legislation, we can arrest, we interview, get search warrants out, we can stop and search, we can enter on virtually any land with very few exceptions. So in real terms, that means that in doing our job, we are acting like policemen. It also means that we have to abide by the same codes of practice as the police do. So things like the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, the way that we treat people, the way that we carry out surveillance is all done in exactly the same way as the police.
And in the 25 years that I've been involved in enforcement, as I've progressed through the ranks, I've seen a number of changes. Everything's improved as time's gone on. It's very much about trying to keep one step ahead of the poachers, the people that we're trying to catch.
Right, among the equipment that we use, probably the most important one for us is a night sight. Magnifies distance approximately 6 times this particular one, and as I say, it's probably the most valuable bit of kit that we have.
The standard kit we wear now, we're all issued with stab-proof vests to a very high standard. Again here, health and safety is paramount, and particularly as the people that we're dealing with, one, we don't know who they are and what the background is, and two, quite often they don't want to get caught. Another piece of kit we're issued with now is basically a baton. As I say, people might find it surprising that we're issued with a piece of equipment like this, but we are potentially going to get into situations where there may be, albeit a controlled amount of risk, but there may be risk. We don't get them out as a matter of course.
They're purely for self-defence. The other bit that we have, obviously because you have the power of arrest, handcuffs as well. If we do arrest anybody, they are handcuffed for their safety, for our safety, for the public safety as well.
On modern surveillance operations, members of the team may be many miles apart, but also within yards of a suspect. So, the latest radio communications equipment with covert mics becomes an essential piece of kit. Over the years, officers on surveillance have learnt never to be too surprised about what they might encounter. On the stakeout you can see here, officers were observing a husband and wife team retrieving an illegal net from a river. Now, bearing in mind it's a cold, fresh October day and the net is tied to the far bank, what would you do? Whilst your wife strips off and then has to swim across the icy water.
Occasionally you do get a bit of a laugh with some of the people that you catch, and one article of clothing that you sometimes find is what we call the Sunderland Gore-Tex sock, which is somebody with a carrier bag on their feet and their trainers over the top just to keep their feet a little bit dry when they're out poaching.
One particular hot topic at the moment with many anglers is the apparent increase in the number and range of species of fish being illegally taken from many of our lakes and rivers, destined for the table.
For fisheries enforcement officers, primarily in the northeast area, our challenges are going to remain the same, in that we'll have to combat the people who are determined to take salmon and sea trout from our rivers, bearing in mind that right on our doorstep we have the Tyne, which is the best salmon river in England at the moment. I think the coarse rivers that are predominantly further south than ourselves, the fisheries enforcement officers in those areas are going to face the challenges that we faced some 15 years ago, and that they're going to have to adapt their approach.
If somebody's out in the sea, an illegal net in the river or something like that, we would like them to report it to us straight away. We don't want them going down, pulling the net out themselves, thinking that they're doing a good thing by protecting the fish. What will happen then is whoever set the net will realise somebody's found it and will shift their activity somewhere else. If an angler sees something, reports it to us, we'll go and deal with it. What we'll hope to do is get to where the net's been reported and stake the area out with other enforcement officers, and when the offenders come back to retrieve the net and get the fish, that's when we move in and arrest them.
I would hope that anglers appreciate the level of commitment that my team show towards fisheries enforcement. We provide a 24-hour service, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. Whether it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the morning in a winter night, they're out there, they're doing the job that they need to do. They do it because they care passionately about the environment, and they have a deep concern about people removing fish from the river illegally, which detracts from the sport. We have over 1,100 kilometres of main river in the northeast area to cover. We have somewhere in excess of 400 still waters. They all need to be patrolled. We can't be everywhere at all hours of the day, so we do rely a lot on the angling public to provide information that we can act on.
So, in answer to the question of what happens to all that rod licence money, well, if this snapshot of life in the fisheries department is anything to go by, quite a lot actually.